5-1 to start the window. What a win. What were we all worried about? Tony Popovic's controversial selections continued on from the squad selection into the starting 11, but ever was he vindicated. Nishan Volupele scoring his second goal of his international career, silencing many of the doubters in the process. It could have been also different. Indonesia missing a penalty in the opening 10 minutes, allowing the Socceroos the room to breathe and capitalise. A flurry of opportunities in the moments that followed, well converted into a comprehensive victory. It's the sigh of relief craved by many Socceroos supporters, but it mustn't stop there, with another critical game against China on the horizon. The Olyroos also kick off their international window in winning ways. Rob Stanton may be heading for the exit after all at the Newcastle Jets, and some new broadcast deals in Australian football on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan, Avil, coming to you straight from the final whistle on Thursday evening. I'm joined by a barely awake Christian Montegan, but we're soldiering on.
Yeah, you could notice I'm also about to shut that. I'm just trying to stay awake as much as possible.
I tried to speed up the intro a little bit just to, cut off some seconds.
Appreciate it. No, when we get into the football chat, I'm sure I'll stay wide awake for sure.
Of course, that's what we're here for. Jacob Stevens, hello to you. Good fun on the live stream tonight.
Yeah, it's great. Always love the live stream, interacting with everybody there, having some good discussions, some good chats, and watching the Socceroos win on top of all that. It's that's a nice added bonus too.
Well, you're sounding suspiciously like an Australian fan there. Be careful, mate. Careful what you're doing.
I've always maintained I will support Australia, especially if they're not playing England, and especially when there's a South Australian presence there, and that always helps when there's Craig Goodwin in the squad.
Yeah, well, on the bench, which we'll get to, which was interesting when we found that out. And Poletti, good evening to you, pulling out a real retro kit there.
Yeah, I find it very interesting that. Like Jacob says, he supports Australia, but of the four of us here, he's the only one not wearing any form of green and gold right now.
Do you even have any?
I don't know.
He's wearing an Indonesian kit. I said before.
Look, well, maybe we've got to fix that, Jacob. You've got to get you into some Australian mode.
Look, there's like a moral and ethical dilemma that I would, come across if that were to ever happen.
I can understand that.
I'm not sure I could bring myself to do that, but I will support from afar, and I want what everybody here wants, right, which is for Australian football to be as good as it can be, and I think if the Socceroos aren't performing, you're not going to get that. So
just as long as it's not against England, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, there's going to be a World Cup someday soon, isn't there?
I've envisioned it. I'm like, that's going to suck. The group chat is going to go so hard when that happens.
Australia up 1-0 after 15 minutes. Jacob has left the chat.
Very good. All right. Well, tonight's game, 5-1, of course, for the Socceroos against Indonesia. It probably didn't play like a 5-1 game, Christian. Indonesia weren't that far away. I think the XG, if you include the penalty that was missed by Indonesia, actually doesn't read too far apart. But the Socceroos, for something that they don't often do, they were clinical in front of goal. They took their opportunities, and a game that, just given the fact that we dropped so many points against teams that we shouldn't have so far in this World Cup qualifying campaign, it was always going to feel nervy going into it. And the fact that we could breathe quite easily for the second 45 of that game was a welcome reprieve.
Yeah, you could tell that first 10 minutes was very nervy from a Socceroos point of view. You could tell they felt the pressure, right? Because even though it's a game against Indonesia, which you think they should win on paper, given the context of the group and where it all sits, I mean, this is a must-win, essentially, right? If we want to get automatic qualification at top two placings, it was a must, right? But Indonesia, to their credit, came out with a lot of intensity. I thought their pressing game was really strong, and they advanced the ball really well in that first 10 minutes. Got their reward with the penalty, which fortunately for Australia, they missed. And then from there, Australia get a penalty a few minutes later up the other end. And from there, they sort of started to settle the nerves and got into the game a bit more. And I think Indonesia's probably rash approach suited Australia better, whereas maybe a Bahrain, for example, would have sat deep and Australia would have struggled to break them apart. That's what the Socceroos have been known to struggle for in recent games against those quality opposition, right? Against Indonesia, it felt as though the spaces were opening up a bit more. That second goal in particular, when Nishan Volupele, sort of split that back four and, ran in behind from, well, not an Adam Taggart assist, but from a ball in behind. So I think Australia exploited that really well. Indonesia, I thought their tactic was to spring balls in behind themselves, right? That's how they were creating a lot of their opportunities, especially in that first half. But Australia neutralised it well. Popovic will be going back and thinking, okay, it wasn't the most perfect performance, but he'll think that there's a lot to build on. That's for sure. The foundations are there, and I think he'll be set up well to qualify in second spot. That's what he'll be thinking.
Yeah, Jacob, the personnel of this game is a big talking point. Of course, that stems from the squad selection as well. Craig Goodwin, we were talking about as a player that was virtually a lock when fit to start in his Socceroos lineup. And you can argue whether Martin Boyle or Nishan Volupele was the direct replacement, because he did come on for Boyle on that right-hand side. But I think most people would have anticipated Goodwin instead of Volupele. How do you reflect on that decision, given, Volupele came on, scored his goal, did well, and then, started the game. But then Goodwin did come on and make an impact and got that assist off the corner as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the best of both worlds, right? It's a case of you didn't start Goodwin when you didn't necessarily have to. He's still able to come off, get some minutes, have an impact. And Volupele as well, it gave him an opportunity to vindicate his selection in the squad, not just in the starting 11, but in the full squad for this window in the first place, because there was a lot of criticism aimed his way and aimed at Daniel Arzani as well. So, yeah, I think it was... Look, in hindsight, a good move from Popovic. It's always easy to say in hindsight, and we were sort of discussing this during the live stream before kickoff. Is it the right move? And I said, look, well, time will tell, right? Because it's going to be an opportunity for him, but can he actually do it? And fair play to him, because I thought he played exceptionally well, by far the best player in that first half, and just really, like Christian said, took advantage of what Indonesia were offering, which was just a lot of space between the lines and a lot of space in behind, and we saw that with his goal and a very nice finish on it as well, because those ones are not always the easiest to convert when the ball's up in the air a bit like that. You've got the goalkeeper in your face. So good composure, good pace, and he looked really lively as well in that first half. So yeah, can't complain too much. It's still a bit of a baffling selection, and perhaps a baffling decision to start, because there's no reason why Craig Goodwin wouldn't have had the exact same amount of impact. But I think if you're also looking at it pragmatically, perhaps it's a case of saving Goodwin's legs for the China game, which is going to be arguably a more difficult fixture, obviously going away there to a side. Yes, okay, Australia beat them in Adelaide, but even then that wasn't the easiest of victories despite the scoreline. So it could be just a case of trying to manage the minutes there and giving Volupele that chance to vindicate himself, which I think he did. So yeah, you get the best of both worlds with it, and you can't complain too much about it, because he performed exceptionally well. And it's one of those things where we were having this discussion on the live stream, and somebody piped in and said, well, maybe it's a case of him being sort of this big game player where he gets these opportunities in these games that really matter, and he's going to be the one that steps up. And if that's the case, then it's a player that you want in a squad for an international side. So look, he definitely showed what he's capable of today. It's about now making sure he can put in those performances consistently, not just for the Socceroos, but also back with the victory in Clubland, where he started out the season quite well, had that injury, has yet to work his way back into the squad. But I think now is going to be his chance. So if he can capitalise on this, it's going to really be a bit of a signal to shut up, I suppose, to some of those people who were going on about the selection in the first place. But again, it's all a lot of ifs, but he's shown so far that he's got what it takes.
And again, Poletti, from Popovic's perspective, he doesn't care what people are talking about, right? He's definitely not an insecure person, right? He does what he believes is right. And, you look a little bit big picture at some of his selections in the squad, but obviously in this game, Nishan Volupele, Adam Taggart, who I had a hinting suspicion last week that maybe he would get a run just because of the similar profile to Duke and the fact that Popovic knows him. And, one thing that we heard a lot during the down periods of the Graham Arnold era, and we've already heard it with Popovic, is that they favourite players that they know and are familiar with. And I honestly don't give any credence to that being a bad thing, Because, is it fair that, people have worked under Popovic before and he feels a lot more comfortable playing under him? No, not at all. But that's football, right? And for a coach that doesn't have, example, like 12 months to go before an Asian Cup when they've come in, he's come in with like 8 games to save Australia's World Cup qualifying campaign, right? So he needs players to win now. It's a very crucial game. I don't think the Taggart experiment works, although he started, but the Nishan Velupillay one obviously did. So at some point, the coach has got to take responsibility, right? And he's got to put the products on the field that he believes can win games of football.
I mean, we see this all the time in international sport, where it doesn't matter what sport it is, coaches generally go with the players they know. And, what you have to remember about football in particular is these coaches only get the players for 2 weeks at a time at most. And that's even less when you look at Australia. You've got these players coming from Europe, right? So like the European-based players didn't even arrive in camp until Tuesday, and they'll be gone as soon as the game's over on Tuesday night. That's a week. You have to factor in rest, recovery. There's a travel day in there, 2 game days, 2 training sessions, I think, if you're lucky. And those are probably the match day -1 sessions that are like proper, these are what the players can do, right? In terms of that. So, of course, you're going to want to work with players that players that have the qualities you desire, particularly for someone like Tony Popovic. When you work in his system, he's not afraid to bring down the hammer if you're not performing to his lofty standards. And so bringing in players who meet those standards, that can meet those standards, when you look at it like that, the Arzani decision starts to make a little bit more sense. But on the flip side, I also understand the criticism of it, because what has Arzani done this season? He's done basically nothing outside of a couple of performances, sparked here or there, and one of those came after he was picked.
Yeah.
Well, we said
best game of the season. Yeah.
Yeah. So we said after he left MacArthur, like if there was anyone who was going to get the best out of him, it was Tony Popovic when he signed up the Victory. And to be fair, he did. So maybe Popovic thinks that in such a small and limited window, he can get the best out of Arzani, and it can catapult him back towards, that trajectory that we all thought he was going to reach in 2018 when he was selected and he was the bright young thing in Australian football. Vince Regari wrote a fantastic article about that for the Sydney Morning Herald. I'd highly recommend checking that one out, because Arzani was supposed to be the next big thing, and, well, this almost seems like it's his last chance.
Yeah. Christian, bringing it back to this specific game against Indonesia, do you think that the team showed perhaps a little bit more maturity than they have in recent times, because they didn't quite know what they were going to get from Indonesia? And to be fair to Kluivert's team, the first 10 minutes, as you were saying, in both halves, they came out really strong, right? And you probably have to prepare to the worst. You're understanding that if they come out and press you high, then what are you going to do? They didn't handle that well in the first 10 minutes, and obviously the penalty came from that as well. But they did settle into the game. We were talking about it as well. As they played the ball through the middle of the field, through O'Neill and Irvine, that Indonesian press would just collapse in on them centrally. So by that kind of 15-minute mark, the team had started to work that out. Bajic and Miller became much more involved in progression in those wide areas going up and down the park. It felt like they kind of worked themselves into the game a little bit better, despite maybe a little bit of a slow start.
Yeah, I mean, Tony Popovic mentioned in his press conference before the game yesterday, he said that it's important just to focus on ourselves, right? Because obviously a new coach for Indonesia coming in, Patrick Kluivert, you can study all you want, which they did, but you don't really know for sure 100% what you're going to expect, right? So I think from a maturity standpoint, I thought the Socceroos handled themselves very well. They were able to weather that storm in the first 10-15 minutes, and then from there they were able to get a grip hold of the game and start to play their football, which I thought they grew into the game more. I thought Lewis Miller was a real standout for me on the flank, because obviously his movement, he's running up and down the flank. He was, connecting in the final third, trying to create chances. He was everywhere. So I thought he was a standout. Jackson Irvine, with his leadership in the middle of the park, was another as well. Aside from the 2 goals he scored, I thought he was critical. So they had all these players in the round who really gelled together as the match progressed. So I think for Popovic, that'll be a big sign, a real positive sign for him, to take, that he can rely on some of these leaders like an Irvine to really take them and to hopefully seal qualification for the World Cup next year. So all in all, I think Popovic, again, he'll have still perhaps a couple of question marks like an Adam Taggart. Who fits in there? Does Yengi get a start against China? Because, I just don't think that experiment worked, in all honesty. I just don't think he did as much. And to be fair, the players that came off the bench, even Daniel Ozani, he didn't really do much because the game sort of fizzled out in the end, didn't it? That last 20 minutes, because of the scoreline. They were just trying to keep it tight, not get any injuries, try and relax for the China game, and just don't do anything silly, basically. So it was a shame that we couldn't really see anything from the bench players. But at the same time, I thought the way the Socceroos handled themselves was, a big sign moving forward in the right direction.
Yeah, so as we were saying, Jacob, I think the Taggart experiment was the flip side of the coin to Veluplay, where that one didn't work out. And then all of a sudden, you're kind of looking at the bench, and it's like, well, Brandon Barello came on. It didn't, as again, Christian said, the game had kind of fizzled out by that point, so maybe it's not a fair assessment of how they'd impacted a game of international football, but didn't really do much. Cassini Yengi's on the bench, hasn't been playing a lot for Portsmouth. You got Noah Botic sitting there in the A-League. He was waiting for the phone call on the weekend. It never came. It seems so obvious to have a player like that, something a little bit different, who's scoring loads of goals at the moment right there. To bring him on, it seems like it would be a great solution.
Yeah, I mean, there's any number of A-League players you could rattle off there that would offer that. Segacic is another great example, right? And he's sort of made a name for himself this season, coming off the bench and being that impact player. So, that seems ready-made as well. Obviously, Archie Goodwin's another one having a great season. It seems like there's a ton of options there that are available that would massively appreciate that call up, but working with the squad that he's got and that he's chosen, and Taggart, it wasn't a fantastic outing for him. The one real spark he had was when he sort of kind of tried to manipulate that ball through for the Veluplay goal.
You tried really hard to credit him with that assist.
I did, and I've watched the replay now, and I don't know why I went so hard for it, because it was a fair effort. Like, he spotted the run and he knew what he wanted to do, but there was no way it was going to work without the defender getting there first. So he got the touch on it, and then the defender made it carry on through to Veluplay. I mean, that was good heads up play, but that was about it. He was just not strong enough physically. He was losing a lot of challenges, just being bodied off the ball. He couldn't hold up play well enough, and he didn't really get himself into positions to be able to have opportunities to put the ball in the back of the net either. So it seemed like a sort of fizzled out performance for him, and there's plenty of options there in the A-League that'll be looking at that and going, why wouldn't you pick me over that?
If you're Popovic, though, wouldn't it be a case of being familiar with those sorts of players, right? Like Adam Taggart, Popovic will know with his experience he can rely on someone like that. Like, he might not get you the goals output, but Noah Botic, for example, we mentioned before, right? He's just come into Camp Popovic a few months ago to try 8 games remaining to save the Socceroos World Cup campaign. Like, you're going to rely on a young striker like that to get you through. I just don't think Popovic is that type of coach, and I think that's why a player like that misses out.
I think as well it sort of plays into the idea that Australia wanted to play really wide this game. It was a lot of Miller and Bajic as the two real focal points, moving the ball forwards into that final third. And I think having someone like Noah Botic in the middle perhaps wouldn't have offered as much freedom, because he would have wanted to lead the line. He'd have wanted to be the one, pushing that defensive line back, and that doesn't quite afford as much freedom for those wingers as somebody like Taggart, who's going to drop inside and bait that press inside and give that space in behind for those wide players. So maybe that played into it a little bit as well, of having somebody who's not known to drop a little bit deeper, and knowing that Indonesia.
You did the same as Paramount Plus.
I did the same as Paramount Plus. Indonesia, might get baited into pressing too high, and they had a good man-to-man press, but it was those moments where they went too heavy in the midfield and gave the space out wide that it opened up. So perhaps the profile then of having Taggart being able to play a bit deeper helped with that as well.
I mean, it's an interesting question or discussion point that you raised there, and Christian sort of touched on it as well. But the idea of relying on that experience, and again, to look at other international sports, it's quite often it can just be so hard to unseat the incumbents. And I think back to the Australian Test team of the early 2000s, where outside of Shane Warne's suspension, it was basically you could put your 11 names on the team sheet every week, and every time they played a game, and it wasn't going to change regardless of where they were in the world, because that was the lineup, and it was basically like that for a good decade or so. So I can understand, much as I said before, limited window, time to work with, just relying on that experience there, particularly when if you're Popovic, and I know he's not necessarily the sort of coach to go to outside criticism, but if Australia by some strange conundrum had have lost this game, everyone would have been calling for Popovic's head, right? Suddenly the pressure's back on him to deliver against China, and then we're looking ahead to a window where we have to face Japan and Saudi Arabia at home and away in that order, and then you're looking at the idea of, do we have to go through the playoffs again? Do we miss out on qualification directly because of how delicately poised this group is? So I completely understand the idea behind doing it, but a perfectly valid point that you've all raised as well. The idea that if you want a game changer off the bench, that there's half a dozen of them sitting in the A-League men right now.
Yeah, and it's just the pros and cons of the approach, right? Like Christian, I agree with everything you just said before, that Popovic was looking to Taggart because he's more experienced, because he's known to him, and again we've very firmly established that is Popovic's preferred method of doing things. And I think where he's gone wrong here is that for someone like Anishan Veluplay, he actually did have a couple of good weeks before coming into camp, where Adam Taggart is coming off quite a lean season, and the goals that he did score, I think he scored 3 in a row, but that was like 2 months ago.
It was right at the start of the season.
He scored like once in the last 4 or 5 games, right? That is not an amazing... And look at Perth Glory. Like, you can compare him to Nish. Nish has had a better month leading up. So you've gone for a player that, yes, is well known to you and experienced, but doesn't have the recent form. That is where the negative side of Popovic's approach comes in. And he's not able to just suddenly click his fingers and Adam Taggart is the player that he used to be. Either a couple of years ago or even a couple of months ago.
Even just last season,
even just at the start of this season when he actually scored a few goals back-to-back, right? So footballers don't work like that. So maybe apart from Daniel Arzani, maybe he's the one exception in the world where you can click your fingers under a new coach and it changes altogether. I want to ask about Jackson Irvine, Christian, because he's just such an enigma of a footballer. From all reports, what I've been reading, he's having like a career season over in Germany. He's captaining a Bundesliga side in St. Pauli. He comes to the Socceroos, and in this game, we touched on the fact that it was very congested in central areas, so it was hard for him to get on the ball too often. But we've seen this from him in the Socceroos national team before, where he's probably not doing amazing in general play, but the story of the Asian Cup was... he's not doing a lot regularly, but somehow he's still getting forward and score goals. And he's done it again tonight. He hasn't had a lot of touches in midfield, but he's finished off 2 goals and earned himself a brace. He's a strange profile of a footballer.
I remember a few months ago, Lockie, you said that it wouldn't be such a shock to see him left out of the squad. And it's like just goes to show how a few months can change, how a new manager can change things around. Not that I think Graham Arnold did anything wrong per se when Irvine was playing under him, but I just think, sometimes it's a new system, it's a new way of playing, and I think he's refound that confidence. And you're right, the Asian Cup, he didn't put in the best performance, as you'd say, but he always popped up at the right moments, the right time, always getting in the box, always finding the right spaces, always picking out the right passes. Like, he just did all the little 1%ers right, and that's what makes players like him such standouts, right? Where sometimes you don't realize the defensive work, for example, the work rate he does behind the scenes. It's all these little things that accumulate into such a great player that he is. Obviously, you mentioned captaining a Bundesliga side. That is a top achievement. Like, to do that for a Socceroo, I think it goes a bit unnoticed sometimes. So yeah, this game in particular, like I said before, aside from the 2 goals, I thought he was tremendous, not only in his leadership, but the way he just carried the game in terms of just dictating, with possession, and also, I guess, the leadership as well, telling these players where to go, constantly going up, talking to them. And it's that sort of vibe that you need in a squad, right? Those types of players which can prove to make the difference. So, yeah, I think he's going to be extremely important, not only now, but fingers crossed, if Australia do qualify for the World Cup, he's going to be an integral part in USA, Mexico, Canada, hopefully, if we get there for Popovic.
So, as you were just talking, I can tell you that Japan have taken a 1-0 lead over Bahrain in the 68th minute. We need Japan to win games because they are so far ahead. There's no point trying to catch them, so we may as well just hope that they take points off everyone else. So far tonight, Poletti, we've had a win, which is great. We're up to 10 points. Everyone else below us is still on 6 for the moment. Saudi Arabia play China in the morning, so we're going to have to root on China to hopefully get a result away from home before we take them on next week. It's still precariously placed in the group. Obviously, you can only beat who's in front of you, and we've done that today. But you can't afford to take your foot off the gas, not with a team like China, who are currently sitting bottom of this group. It's another team that we have to put away because we know, as you said before, that the challenge of Japan and Saudi Arabia is coming in the next window.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, best case scenario, probably Saudi Arabia, China play out a draw. That way, you're looking at a situation where you get to go in against China next week. If you can get a win there, go up to 13 points, suddenly you can create some separation in the group, right? And
we could be qualified, theoretically.
Because Saudi play Japan next, so...
Yeah, if all the amazing results go our way.
That's a very slim chance. Actually, didn't you put a fancy graphic in the group chat that showed that all the teams that could qualify this window? I don't think Australia was one of them. I think it was New Zealand.
If we're 4 points ahead of Saudi now. If we won the next game... Oh, no, because they'd be with... Oh, they'd be exactly... Okay, yeah. They'd be 6 points away. So they'd have to make up 6 points in goal difference. So, yeah, mathematically not quite, but close.
Yeah, but still close enough. You got one hand on qualification automatically, and that's all you can hope for. So just hope that the results fall our way or fall Australia's way, and don't have to go through the disastrous route of the playoffs, and during those windows might actually be able to schedule some friendlies against some high quality opposition and actually start preparing for a World Cup, as opposed to, oh no, we actually have to win so that we can make the World Cup.
Still fighting for it, yeah.
Jacob, is this a win that makes you feel more confident about Australia's chances of automatic progression? Because the reality is, whilst we can beat Indonesia 5-1, the final leg of this is against much higher opposition in Saudi Arabia and Japan. So, Japan, we might be in the situation where they're playing a slightly different team, maybe some more local players, because they'll be in a scenario where they've already qualified for the World Cup, full stop, 100%. Saudi Arabia obviously are going to be a tough challenge away from home in the final game of the series, which could be all on the line in that one, because a win against Indonesia is not the same against something like a Saudi Arabia. Does it give you confidence that we can then go on and beat a good team like them?
I think it's the manner in which the result was achieved that gives me that confidence, because it was clinical. Yes, okay, there were defensive errors. Jason Guerrero in particular was being picked apart quite often, but it felt like even with that, it was then Matt Ryan was able to step up and make those saves, and okay, yes, they conceded one, but it was a well taken goal, a good finish, not too much that Ryan could have done, to be honest, in that situation, but for the rest of the game really nullified the chances that Indonesia created, and then on the flip side took the chances that they did create and were able to put the ball in the back of the net frequently, and it's a sort of thing we haven't really seen much too often from Australia, and I think that it's a good sign that okay, yes, it's Indonesia, but it's a team that you should be beating, and it's a team that you should be beating sort of, with that 5-1 type of scoreline. So the fact that they're doing it now relatively stress-free, I mean, there was that opening 10 minutes where, perhaps if Indonesia score that penalty or that free kick, things go a little bit differently throughout the match. It's a bit more nervy and tense in that first half. But I think the fact that they were able to capitalise on the fact that Indonesia missed those chances. Matt Ryan pulled out a great save for the free kick, and then Indonesia missed that penalty hitting the post. They were able to take that and go, right, we've dodged a bullet here now. Let's go and put, a couple past them. And that's exactly what they did. They put 2 past them in like 5 minutes. Job done as far as we were concerned, and then 3-0 by half time, and it felt like it was all wrapped up. So it was the manner in which they went about it that I was really impressed with, and gave me that confidence that they're able to take these little gifts that they're given, where a team fails to score almost a gimme, and then they've gone up the other end of the pitch and they put the ball in the back of the net a couple of times and they've killed the game off completely. That's not what we've seen from the Socceroos for quite a while, it seems. So that's the really promising thing, I think, is the manner in which they went about it and the mentality that they seem to have. So, they'll also take confidence from the fact that they beat China, obviously in Adelaide, first time under Tony Popovic. So brand new system and a very different system to what they've been playing under Arnold. And then they went and okay, it was perhaps, the scoreline flattered them a little bit, but a 3-1 victory and a decent performance and a good result. They'll take a lot of confidence from that because, yes, they're travelling away, but, off the back of a 5-1, they know they can beat China. They know what the Chinese side's weaknesses and strengths are. I think it's a really good opportunity. So, yeah, I'm pretty confident heading in. And we've always said, we really want 6 points from this window. It's going to be absolutely huge if they can get the 6 points because, like we were just touching on there, it almost sort of puts one hand on automatic qualification. So I don't see any reason why they can't go to China and perform. And as the other thing as well that's just come to my mind is this is an Indonesia side, a brand new look Indonesia side. Nobody's seen these guys play before under this coaching staff and with this mix of players, and yet Australia were able to deal with it pretty easily. So that's another element to it. You're coming up against an unknown and it's not phased you much. So there's a lot of confidence, I think, heading into this next game, which is really cool to see because a lot of people very anxious heading into this one, especially with the team selection. But I think a performance like that is gonna soothe the nerves a little bit.
And to defeat the peculiarity of the new manager bounce as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Good to get one over the football gods like that. Christian, I've saved this one for you, just special. Matt Ryan in goals. He did have a good performance, and I think, with goalkeepers, it can often be a situation of you just got to take your moment when it's presented to you. Joe Gauci also got a move in the summer to League One. Obviously, Matt Ryan's playing at a higher level. Gauci injured, wasn't even available for selection, and now Matt Ryan comes in and has a good performance. It feels to me coming off that game that even if Joe Gauci is now fit, that is straight away Matt Ryan's spot to lose again.
Oh, definitely. I think he's taken his opportunity with both hands and what you expect, right? Because, no, he has. Because, even though I admit before, he had a good game. He made some good saves. And like I said before the game started, I think the leadership is important, right? Like, as much as I rate Joe Gauci, and he will be a future number one Socceroo, there's no doubt about it in my mind. I think right now, leading into this World Cup, Matt Ryan, I think, is the more stable option. And we just mentioned before how Popovic tends to favour those types of players, right? He leans on those sorts of leadership qualities. So, no surprise there. He's fortunate in a way that it was against Indonesia, not against Japan, for example, where, Japan most likely would be dominating the game, or Saudi Arabia. In that sense, it sort of fell his way. And then against China, you'd expect sort of the same thing, right? Albeit away from home. It will be probably a bit more tougher compared to an Indonesia. But, at the same time, I think Ryan's been put in a really favourable position, should I say. And I think, he'll take it with both hands, like I said.
All right, that'll do us for today on the Socceroos. We still have some more stuff to talk about, of course. We will look ahead to the China game in a little more detail on Tuesday morning's episode of the podcast. We will be doing another live stream watch along on the Tuesday night as well, so plenty of content coming out over the next couple of days. Then we're the only other men's Australian national team in action over the last little while. Poletti The Olyroos won the first game of their window as well. The Doha International Under-23 Cup 2-1 against Croatia, which is a very reputable European footballing country. Obviously, World Cup finalists in the not too distant past. Yaya Dekuli was man of the match with a goal. Jacob Stevens is doing a little fist pump right now.
Yeah.
And Keelan Adamson from your neck of the woods, Poletti. There you go. There's your little fist pump. Good to see young Aussies following on from the under-20s of a month ago as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. More than happy to see that happening. Just that's what we want. That's a sign of a good national team structure. Is that at all levels the performances are coming in. To do it against European opposition just makes it all the much better.
Absolutely. Have we figured out if there is a final for the Doha International Under-23 Cup?
I don't know.
No.
There's a final until there's not.
So,
Okay. Well,
Schrodinger's final.
they've got a game against the UAE. What is it? The 23rd. So that'll be Sunday morning, and then another one on the 26th. So Wednesday morning Australian time. Good luck to them. I think the Saudi Arabia-China game is like 5 o'clock tomorrow morning as well, and the seniors as well. So typical Asian football, just not giving us friendly time zones to watch games, but that's okay. What have we got? China's 10 p.m. I think next week on the Tuesday as well. So we'll be up a little bit late for that one.
Well, it's a good thing that for those overnight games now, this is not necessarily an option that's been available. Certainly for Matilda's fans, at least in years past, is friendly and easily accessible replays. So at least we can wake up tomorrow morning and we could watch a replay of Saudi Arabia and China on Paramount Plus.
All right, we're going to cut out a little bit there. We had a pre-record. I'm not going to try and pretend that we're taking a break and coming back. It's about 11:30 at night at the moment, but a little bit of chat about Robbie Stanton at the Jets and some broadcasting news as well. These lovely Round Ball Australia 24-25 home kits are now on sale on the Round Ball Australia website, .com.au/shop if you want to go there straight away, or there's plenty of images and buttons on there you can click. We really do appreciate it. We've already got a lot of orders come through already, which is really cool. We'd love to have you with one. But if spending money on something like that isn't something that you feel comfortable doing, that's completely fine with us. If you can give a subscription to the YouTube channel, we are very, very close to getting 1,000 subscribers, which is a big milestone on YouTube. It allows you to start generating ad revenue and stuff like that. So it's really the only milestone that seriously matters in YouTube anymore. So we probably won't ask again if we get over that mark, but we're only 200 away. We've accelerated a lot in the last couple of weeks, which is really cool to see. So we just need a few more of you to hit that button, and then we'll be in a really good place. But yes, the shirts are up for sale, $65. They're good value. They're high quality. What can you tell? I think it's pretty clear to see that I'm really enjoying mine. So if you want to support us, that's the best way to do it. But if not, YouTube subscription really helps us out and is completely free. And don't forget as well, RoundsBall10 is the code to use for 10% off as well in the store for the shirts. So yeah, hope you enjoy them, but back to the pod. All right, we're welcoming in Chris Macpherson. Chris, hello. Big news out of your neck of the woods up in Newcastle. We talked about Robbie Stanton and his rather unique press conferences that he's had throughout this season, but a report's come out from James Gardner at the Newcastle Herald suggesting there is a little bit of unrest behind the scenes at the Jets. The quote in here is that Stanton signed a 2-year extension before Christmas, but now appears unlikely to continue beyond this season after an impasse with club management over football department resources and staffing. Going from a new deal to maybe not continuing at all is a big shift, Chris.
It certainly is. It's it's a bit of a switch of tact, and there's nothing that's confirmed as such from what we can see outside of this report from James Gardner in the Newcastle Herald. But yeah, as you said, Rob's press conferences have got a little bit peculiar. He's clearly got an avenue that he's trying to follow. I think he's trying to find a way to leverage the club to get them to work with him around providing resources, etc. We know they've been limited budget. They had new owners come in the off-season, but I think he's just getting frustrated that maybe things aren't going in the direction that he wants, and there might be, if you read between the tea leaves, there might be some influence from different parties that are involved at different spots, and it sounds like it's a pretty challenging situation, but it sits now with a point of where do they go if they don't have Rob Stanton, and is Rob Stanton going to jump, or is he going to be pushed, which obviously has financial impacts for the club around the way that piece goes down as well.
So it's a bit of a shift, right, Christian? Because the first kind of moment on this timeline, you'd say, is back in Unite round, where a loss to the Mariners in the F3 Derby, talking about how he didn't know what his future was at the club, and just kind of talking in weird ways about his role as a manager at the football club. And then supposedly he signed a 2-year extension to his deal not long after that, but now we're back in the same place where he's not sure about his future.
Yeah, I mean, when that eventuated in Unite round, we thought, okay, he's sort of speaking his truth a bit too much. He's being a bit too honest. Maybe it's a sign that he wants out and he's going to be out the door soon, right? But then, like you said, he got that 2-year extension. And it's like, okay, maybe it's a rebuilding process. Maybe he's part of the long-term plan for this Jets side. And then you listen to this press conference a few days ago, which we touched on the podcast, and it did give a few mixed signals, right, as to what's actually going on behind the scenes. So that's, I guess, the confusing part for everyone, especially Newcastle Jets supporters, just thinking, what on earth's going on, right? So in one way, it's great that he is being honest in front of the media, because I do feel as though we need more of that in Australian football, right? Just not covering the cracks and just saying what you want to say. But at the same time, it does sort of make you wonder, if he is being so honest, then is that a sign that he will be out the door come season's end? I don't think he'll leave during the season. It could happen, but I don't think so. It'll be at the end of the season if something happens, or if the ownership don't agree on a few particular things. But yeah, it could be the playing group as well, because he admitted in that press conference that they have limited resources. He's not able to really fully engage and grasp what he wants to do, right? He can't implement his style of football the way he actually wants to a certain degree, right? Despite getting these great results in previous weeks, going on that great win streak. And that just shows, I guess, his coaching ability. He does have it. It's just the resources available to him. It's going to really handicap him in the long term. So that's probably where he sees all of it.
So in this report, Chris, it said that Mark Milligan, Adam Griffiths and Ruben Zadkovic have all been contacted to gauge their interest in the Newcastle Jets, which is a significant step if you're actually reaching out to people to coach them for next season. How do you rate those three names, and are there any others that you know of that might be in the running as well?
Well, I think it's an interesting one, because at the end of the day, on paper, Rob Stanton's got a reasonably successful record, to Christian's point, with the resources he's been provided, both playing and otherwise. So for them to go out and again, a couple of those names, or all of those names, have ties to the club formally, right? As players at different stages and to different levels of success. But Ruben Zadkovic, take the last 3 weeks out of it, and he's had one of the worst years on record in the A-League. Again, not everything is down to the coach. We know that, but it would be a big leap to bring him back after he hasn't really been successful in his last 2 gigs. Adam Griffiths has been assistant coach. Mark Milligan, similarly, they don't have a sustained experience record. I think that the club needs to try and make everything move in Stanton's direction. The other one that I think could be of interest, but I don't know whether they'd go down this route, is there's a guy, Damien Zane, who's been involved in the Northern New South Wales setup. He's involved all through the Jets academies. If they are genuine about building a pathway through the club and setting up similar to what Adelaide and Central Coast have done and bringing those players through, he's coached in the NPL at a successful level. He's been an assistant coach at different times at the Jets. He would be as good an option, I would think, especially being a local, as any of these. Look, I don't say that any of them are bad options. I think Zadkovic is probably not going to be the taste that Jets fans want in their mouth, if you want to use that as a parlance. Milligan and Griffiths could be received okay. It could be a nice little return back to the days of the Griffiths brothers. We'll bring Joel in as well if Adam comes along, and happy days. But yeah, I don't know that any of them present better options, and I don't know that it's a step forward and up for the Jets. It's just a change, and if they make that change, that's just saying, well, we're not prepared to invest any further. And I think we just keep circling around, and we're in the same spot if that is the situation that we've gotten to. Again, we're reading between tea leaves here, and there's a bit of guesswork going on based on Gardner's article. But yeah, I think their best option is to dig down the back of the couch, rustle some tins around the ground, try and find a little bit more money to try and give, at least meet Rob Stanton halfway, because he's done a pretty good job in the last 2 years. And to Christian's point, over that run, if we take out that last game, it looked like the Jets were really heading in the right direction, which has made this a little bit more bizarre because your night round, it made sense. They were off to a sluggish start. They didn't do well at the start of the year. Now, they've had one game, one half of football really against Western United that they slept through out of their last 8 games, and they've been gritty, they've been impressive, they've done all the things that Newcastle fans want to see. But obviously, Rob's trying to, press the button to try and get an outcome that he sees as being beneficial in the long term. And as much as you don't want to coach or any certain players to have full control of the club and, carte blanche, I think there needs to be some backing of Rob Stanton here and an investment in his club if these owners are serious about being the ongoing and long-term presence and licensees of the Newcastle Jets.
How much management experience does Adam Griffiths have, out of interest?
Well, I think it's just been assistant manager work with a couple of clubs over the last couple of years. And I'll get this wrong, but I think he's spent a couple of years at Wellington, maybe. He's been around a couple of the clubs historically, but yeah, no head manager, experience as far as I'm aware. Certainly not at that top level. So it looks like he progressed straight from playing through. Ruben obviously has the most out of those 3, we know that, but what quality or performance and results he got out of those 2 clubs?
Yeah, so you got Ruben Zakovic there, as you said, his record definitely this year has been, there's left a lot to be desired, Christian, and he's a contracted coach at a different football club. Then you have Mark Milligan, who has, been in the conversation for Melbourne Victory for their last 2 appointments, but has gone over and joined Peter Klimowski with the Malaysian national team, right? And he's only just made that move. So he seems to have a path laid out ahead of him. So when you consider all the different factors of those 3 names that have been mentioned, Newcastle Jets fans won't be looking at that with any high degree of excitement or optimism.
For the short term, no, but long term, maybe, especially with Mark Milligan. I think he does have a lot of potential. Jacob's touched on it with the Adelaide side of things. Defensively, when he was there, he really, sort of made Adelaide a more defensive unit. They were much better equipped, right? And I think he can bring some of those elements to Newcastle. He knows the club, having previously played there in his career. He knows the environment. I think it can be a good fit. But again, the ownership need to take it with a course of patience, right? They need to understand that this will be a long-term project because Newcastle, like I mentioned before, the resources at the moment, they don't quite have it to match, these big boys in the competition. So it's going to take a couple of seasons, maybe 3 or 4 to really, I guess, build in the right direction and see if there is a good trajectory going forward. It can't just be, winning a string of 3 or 4 games and then going back to ground zero. It needs to be a consistent building process. And if you get someone in like Milligan, who's been at the club, like I said, it could be, fans might warm to it. I don't know. But yeah, Zakovic, my thoughts already. I haven't been impressed with him this season. I know Brisbane, there have been, stuff going on in the background and perhaps it has been all smooth sailing. But in terms of his management style, I don't think he'd be the right fit for Newcastle.
Just back on to Adam Griffiths there, Lockie. Manly NPL was where he started out. Then he went to the Wanderers for a year and then those couple of seasons at Wellington. So 3 or 4 seasons in total in the A-League as an assistant coach, plus 2 years as a head coach in the NPL. So not a massive resume, but not nothing.
Yeah, not nothing for sure. I think, Mark Milligan definitely stands out, but again, you balance that with, the realistic probability of actually landing him after he's just made a move that he's determined to be, an assistant in a national team. That's a very different direction to probably being able to get a head coaching gig in the A-League. So, whether they could even get him is a different question. All right, we'll leave the Jets there. A little bit of broadcast news for the A-League. Now, this is quite exciting, to be real. Paramount Plus have announced a partnership with Sports Pick Live. And Chris, this essentially gives access to A-League games to be shown in many public venues around the country. There is a list. It's mainly targeted at New South Wales and Victorian venues at the moment, but that list is set to rapidly expand. This is a crucial step for exposure. It's one thing that's been pivotally missing in terms of an A-League broadcast arrangement, being on Paramount Plus, being a streaming service, not having all those games that you can just have on in TVs in pubs and clubs is the phrase we all like to use, but just out and about and just for people to happen to step upon a game of A-League football, and that seems like it's about to change, which is cool.
Yeah, it's been one of the black holes for Paramount. We'll say one of, probably the biggest, though, in terms of finding casual fans Obviously, it's on that platform on Paramount, so a Paramount person, a subscriber, can go and find it there. But the average Joe, as you said, in the pubs and clubs, who's in there on a weekend, and there's a gap in between, realistically in those two states, especially the NRL and the AFL, or we kind of missed the window where there wasn't any of that and we're in between the cricket and stuff and capitalising on those. They're not seeing the soccer because there's an extra significant cost. The licensing to use Paramount Plus for broadcast didn't really exist in terms of venues, so venues had to, if they wanted to try and run the risk of falling foul of someone, and especially when they're tied to such a large entity with the whole of the group that sits behind them in Channel 10. It wasn't a risk for venues to do for the number of A-League fans that were demanding it. But again, it's how we get those extra casual fans, the people that sit there and watch it and realise the product's actually improved from when they watched it 5 or 10 years ago on Fox Sports on the occasional game. They'll see that, and hopefully it'll result slowly. It's going to be if you build it, they will come. In people coming to games, building that casual fan base on top of the rusted-on fans who are the ones that are still turning up to the A-League 20 years into it.
Yeah, Christian, as Chris said, it's not like amazing timing that the footy codes have started around the country, but we'll think about next summer, right? When the cricket hasn't quite started yet, the A-League's kicking, it's kind of got its own little window in the calendar. It'd be nice to just walk into a restaurant or a pub and see the A-League on.
No, for sure. This is definitely cool. It's great because I remember a couple of years ago when City played the Mariners in the grand final, I was out with mates at a pub and I was thinking to myself, I can't watch this game because it won't be televised on TV, right? It's like, where on earth am I going to see it? So I literally had my phone on, had the Paramount Plus app, and then I was literally just streaming it from there, just had it on the side, just having glances over and watching it. And so to have this initiative is great because although, yes, it does bring in casual fans, for people who actually love the A-League and, happen to go out with mates, they're able to actually watch it as well, which is good as well. So I think it's a win for all parties. It's great for the exposure as well for the competition. I think it can only be good moving forward.
For sure. And then finally, Chris, we're going to rely on your broadcasting expertise to dumb this one down for us a little bit. But from a Football Australia perspective, they've signed a production deal with tech company Liger, L-I-G-R, Liger, which is essentially a centralised live production company. And this is going to cover several competitions around the country. The state NPLs, I know some already use it. The Australian Youth Championships, which I think is like the emerging Socceroos and emerging Matildas now, and the Australia Cup and the Australian Championship as well. And now, I think crucially, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, this doesn't mean that they're all going to be broadcast by the same people, but it is the same company producing those games, and then this centralised method kind of allows a lot more efficiency in terms of broadcast, but then in terms of advertising, creating highlights and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah, I think the move here, and if we go back a year and you touched on it there, some of the leagues were using Liger and connections to Liger for their production over the last couple of years. Not all. Having the experience with the Northern New South Wales League, who I believe are the first NPL to have kicked off this season. Essentially, Football Australia went out and said, let's get a consistent platform, let's get a centralised process and structure in terms of how we produce it. My understanding, certainly with the NPLs, is that they'll be going live via their NPL or Federation YouTube channels. But again, that production is all being centralised, so it'll be consistent in terms of how the games are produced, the graphics, all those sorts of pieces, which will mean that it doesn't either need to be done in-house or the federations aren't each individually trying to negotiate and find providers. My understanding is it all went out to tender. It was a structured process that Football Australia drove, packaging all of this to get it to this point. And obviously we've got to that point now with Liger. My understanding again is that Liger will subcontract in some or all parts the actual filming. The commentary will be handled within the leagues themselves, which has been fairly traditional anyway. And that's how they'll operate there. How they'll work on those other national competitions is to be determined, I'm assuming. There wasn't a lot of detail in terms of the releases that have come so far or the information that's out. But yeah, I think again, it's an efficient broadcast. It's centralising everything. It's a bit of consistency across the NPLs, which as we look to align and have champions going through to the Australian Championship and all those sorts of things, it's going to create a nice consistent structure so fans will have familiarity, will know where to find it. It's not for, one league, we're going off to this streaming provider. For another league, it's on their YouTube channel. For another, it's on a Facebook feed. It's getting a consistency there. It's going to make it a lot easier for fans. And again, it's starting to get to making all of our football content from our state league level up so much more accessible for the football fan and for Joe Public.
Almost like a connected pyramid. That's crazy. Crazy concept. Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. I think that will do for this episode of the Roundball Australia podcast. I'm sorry, Christian, I'm not going to come to you on that one. I feel like the topic of conversation there just needs one answer and then we can leave it there. But thank you for your time today, mate.
Thanks, mate. Chris is the expert, so we'll leave it to him.
Sorry. I just clicked my mute button, so I couldn't hear you. My bad. That's my end. Chris Macpherson, thank you.
Thanks, Lockie.
Cheers. All right. We'll be back on Tuesday, I guess, for some more Socceroos chat in the window. Don't forget, Roundball 10, your code for the kits, limited time sale on those. Very exciting. Christian, you did a little promo for us earlier today. Yeah, looking good. Trying on the kit for the first time in the alleyway.
Yeah, I saw the video you posted before. It was surreal getting that kit. It's like, oh, it's actually here. It's arrived. It's happening. So yeah, exciting times ahead. Hopefully, we get people supporting us. Obviously the work we do, the content we believe, it's hopefully great. For our viewers and keeping them informed about Australian football, national teams, domestic competition, NPL, all that sort of stuff. So we wanted to provide a little something back to fans with the kit. Hopefully they enjoy it.
For sure. Go get them. Only a bit over a week left in the sale, so make sure you don't miss out. But thank you all very much for listening. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.